My name's Tim Blodgett, and this is my story. I grew up in Manchester, Connecticut. I was very active as a child and as a teenager. I grew up in an Italian Catholic family. My grandparents came from Sicily, so we were in Catholic Mass every Sunday, immediately following a big bowl of pasta. I went through my christening, and I also got my first communion. I got baptized when I was about 2 months old, so I didn't really have much say in it. Received my first communion at the age of 6 and got confirmed at the age of 15. I always believed in God, however I never really sought a relationship with Him. I never tried to learn the Bible. I never tried to analyze what the priest was saying. I just kind of believed there was a God because everyone in my family told me there was. Growing up in Connecticut, September 11th, 2001 was a huge tragic day for us up in Connecticut, as it was for everybody. I had a lot of friends and family who were personally related and personally touched by the tragic events that took place there. And I remember immediately thinking to myself that I've got to do something about it. You know, I've got to try to make a change. I've got to try to do something. It was just weighing really, really heavy on my heart and on my mind. And I remember asking myself, up until that point in my life, I never, I had people pass away, but I never experienced such a tragic event that happened to so many people. I had a lot of emotions at the time. I was fearful. I told myself that it could happen at that time, and we were that complacent when it couldn't happen again. I was very angry. I took it very personal. I asked myself, these people came over here and they killed a bunch of our citizens for no reason. An eye for an eye. I wanted to go do the same thing for them. I was also very sad. Like I said, I took it very personal. Went to a lot of different events for the 9/11 victims, and saw the firsthand the tears and the emotions that people were feeling, and I kind of brought them upon myself as well. I decided to join the Marine Corps in 2002, shortly after September 11th, and I was very motivated about going. My dream was always to go to college and play soccer, but after those events, it really changed my mindset and my perspective on life. I was always very competitive, even while at boot camp. At boot camp, I pushed myself to the limits every day. I remember going to bed every night and waking up every morning telling myself that day I'm going to push myself to the absolute max. And if I don't give it everything that I have, then I haven't done my best that day. I graduated as an Ironman and honor graduate out of about 500 Marines. And quite honestly, it didn't mean much to me because I only had one goal going into the Marine Corps, and it wasn't fulfilled at that time. I got to my first duty station when I was 19 years old, and less than 30 days later, I was in Iraq. I remember like it was yesterday. There was a series of questions that were going through my head as soon as we touched down in Kuwait. And I remember asking myself if this was my destiny. Did I come here to die? Did I come here to kill? Did I come here because it was an experience that I needed? Did I come here because I just didn't know? I always had this void since September 11th that was never really filled, that I tried to fill with other things. And I constantly questioned myself while I was over there. Am I fulfilling this void that I have? Am I coming over here and accomplishing something that I was set out to do? As far as that void that I was trying to fill, it didn't get filled at deployment, and I had another 2 deployments in Iraq, and it didn't get filled there either. I decided to get out of the Marine Corps in 2007 because I wanted to start the next chapter of my life. I wanted to start a family. I wanted to get my college degree, really just kind of move on from the Marine Corps. Readjustment out of the Marine Corps was very difficult for me. I had a series of jobs that I went through, had built up anger, and really took it out on the job itself. I had a lot of aggression, still was very sad, very unfulfilled. I was diagnosed with PTSD in 2007 and went to weekly counseling through the Veteran Affairs office, which seemed to kind of numb the pain for a little while. There were certain times that I had my PTSD under control. I guess one of those times would be when I met my wife, because for some reason she actually liked me at that time. I think she liked the fact that I was a Marine. Keyword was. She never really wanted to be the military wife or have those military experiences, which I understand. Unfortunately, God had other plans for us. I was called back to service in 2008 and was in Afghanistan by 2009. A lot of people don't understand military contracts, but when you sign a 4-year active duty contract, you're actually signing 4 years of active duty and 4 years of inactive reserve. This deployment was a lot different than my other deployments. It was in Afghanistan. It was a different climate. It was different conditions. It wasn't your traditional combat where the bad guy shoots at you and you shoot back. It was much more guerrilla warfare, if you will. It was a lot of IEDs, roadside bombs, a lot of cowardly acts on the enemy's part. I remember being bitter throughout this whole deployment. I was a staff sergeant, I was an E6, and I was responsible for anywhere from 45 to about 150 Marines at any given time. This whole time Jen and I are still together. We had gotten engaged before I left, and I really wanted to start a life with her. I wasn't going to get married before we left, and then God forbid something happened to me over there and I didn't make it back, and so I wanted to wait till I returned, because I knew it was something that I wanted to do. It was just when time was right. Throughout the deployment, I had a couple close calls. My vehicle struck a few roadside bombs, and fortunately for me, I was able to walk away from them. On July 17, 2010, one of my young Marines was coming up beside me on a convoy and hit a 160-pound IED. And I caught a big brunt of that as well. And I had fractured my back. I had a traumatic brain injury. We had 52 vehicles within that convoy, and I had to medevac over 8 Marines out within a 5-day period. That would be the last time that I ever went on a mission in the Marines. By this time, my PTSD had gotten significantly worse. I had a lot more built up anger, on top of physical pain that I was feeling every single day. The doctors had me on all types of painkillers, all types of medication. I just hate taking pills. I never was one that really benefited from them at all. I was attached with the Wounded Warrior Company in Camp Pendleton, California. They wanted to keep me there for treatment for a 6-month period. I convinced them that I wanted to go back to the East Coast to be closer to my fiance and be closer to my family. They granted me permission to get stationed in Raleigh, North Carolina at an instructor staff. My duties there were to do body transfers and funeral details for Marines that had lost their life. This only made things worse. I would go to the funeral and I had to present flags to family members who lost their servicemen and women. I'd have to go pick up bodies of Marines that committed suicide. As a Marine, you can't really say no to anything. You just kind of suck it up and go do your job and go do your mission, and that's what you do. So that's what I did. Unfortunately for me, I tried to suppress things because I still had that void that just wasn't filled, so I tried to fill it with alcohol. I drank every day. I would have a funeral at 8:30 in the morning, and I would make sure that I had alcohol left over from the night before, so that way I could drink on the way to the funeral and be able to calm my nerves down enough in order to present the flag to that family member who lost their loved one. I was systematically killing myself, and I didn't even know it. I kept telling myself that this is just what I'm supposed to do. This is what I'm supposed to do. It numbs the pain. I don't remember. It's the only time in my life that I've ever blacked out from drinking was when I got back from this deployment, and it was probably a combination of all the medication that I was on as well as the alcohol. I guess my body kind of had enough, and I had had enough, and it was after a night of drinking, and I tried to take my own life. I was automatically put in a psychiatric ward at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and was put in a 2-month treatment facility up in Poplar Springs, Virginia. It was easy to do the right thing when I was in the hospital. The only people I had to answer to were a therapist. Everyone in there was just as lost as I was. So our conversations dealt strictly with that time, that place, what we were going to do that day. And at the time, I felt like it gave me a good baseline to move on and stay sober and have coping strategies that I can deal with my PTSD. I was wrong. I had a few months of leave built up prior to getting out of the Marines. I started working for Cisco Systems in the summer of 2012, and I was medically retired October of 2012. During my time at Cisco, the last thing in the world that I ever wanted to do was talk about my military career. Just wanted to do my job there and go home. Never really looked to build any friendships, never really looked to build a bond with people there. Just wanted to support my family and move on. So I would stay late at work and hide my drinking and hide my anger and take it out in other ways. I knew that my drinking was pushing everybody away from me. That was close. I took my anger out on Jen. I took my anger out on my family. I stayed to myself. I wasn't a good father. I wasn't a good husband. and Jen and I separated in December of 2012. It was at that point in my life that I knew I was going against everything that I ever wanted, which was a family. I wanted to be a good dad. I wanted to be a good father. I wanted to be a good husband. I wanted to be a good friend. I wanted to be a good son. And I was failing at all of those. I remember when Jen and I were separated, I remember being in our bedroom and feeling so lonely and crying. And, I remember asking God, I said, if you're a God, if there's a God out there, please, help me. This is not what I want. This is not what I need. I need more in my life. I want to be more fulfilled. I want to make the right decisions. I just don't know how to deal with this. I don't know why, but Jen and I talked about it, and Jen decided to give me another chance. And we told each other that if we were going to both move on from here, we both needed to put everything in the rearview mirror and move forward. On January 26th of next month, I will have been sober for 1 year. Jen and I started attending Stanley Chapel March of 2013. Felt like every time Pastor Dale was preaching, he was talking directly to me, and it was like that tunnel vision between him and I. And that conviction that I felt, it's stronger than words. During the guardrail series that Pastor Dale did, it just made so much sense, and it just clicked in my mind. I use that in my day-to-day operations of my life. I think guardrails are huge, and I know they've definitely been a successful mechanism and coping mechanism for myself. I stopped rejecting God. I looked back at my life, and I looked at the biggest regrets that I've had in my life. And it wasn't that God wasn't there. It was because I wasn't listening to God, and I was trying to do everything on my own. I know now that God has a purpose for everything and everyone, and I know that He doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't always give you the answer that you want, but God's never wrong, and He'll always lead you in the right direction, and He'll never fail. When the talk of Life Springs Church came up, quite honestly, I didn't even know where Spout Springs, North Carolina was. I just kept hearing Spout Springs, and it kind of it touched my heart, but I didn't really understand how huge it was going to be and how huge of an impact in my life it was going to make. When I found out that it was close to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, I realized that this is something that I needed to do. It wasn't if I could do it, I will make time, and I need to be a part of this. There are so many veterans out there that I've realized firsthand and seen firsthand that don't have the opportunity like I did to get into a good Bible-based church with good supporting people that don't just talk about doing things, they actually go out and make a difference. There's veterans all over the place that rely solely on the Veterans Affairs and the medication and the treatment centers that they provide. But no medication and no treatment center can ever be as faithful as God can in their life. Through God's grace and mercy, He's given me the opportunity to lead my family in the direction that I know I need to lead them. Our church family is the closest thing to family that we have, really closer than family that we have. The greatest people that I've ever met, I've met at Stanley, and it's been such a huge blessing in our lives. Between the Tyler group and the Thursday night message and the Sunday night message and the online sermons, it always gives us the opportunity for my wife and I to sit down and review something that we didn't quite get, or talk about something that fits within our life that we both need to work on. And since my wife and I have put God as the center of our life, we have been the happiest that we have been in our lives. Raising our son in the church in that environment is a huge miracle within our lives. To see where I was a year ago and where my family was going, and the sadness and the despair that was happening, to see where we are now is just, it's nothing less than a miracle. And the only one that could truly fulfill that is God Himself. I am not perfect by any means. I let my flesh get in the way of a lot of things, but I catch myself before I get too angry. And James 1:19 says, "Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger, for anger does not accomplish God's righteousness." And that is a huge verse for me that I have to think of and speak to myself every single day. I had so much anger for so long and so much built up aggression. And honestly, I didn't know how I was going to make things right with God. I always thought that I wasn't worthy, and I wasn't going to be good enough to sit in church. And Stanley chapel and God's grace has really changed my whole perspective on the Lord, whole perspective on a relationship with Him, really just my whole perspective on life. And I'm very, very fortunate to be in the position that I am for me and my family. And my name is Tim Blodgett, and that was my story.